The emergency beacon blinked red against the twisted wreckage, just 3 meters away. Might as well have been 3 light years for all the good it did Zenth now. His crystalline carapace had cracked along the left shoulder where the bulkhead collapsed, leaking the phosphorescent fluid that kept his nervous system functioning. Each breath sent fractal pain through his thoracic cavity. But the physical agony was nothing compared to the memory of what those humans had done to his squad. Zenth dragged himself another few centimeters across the debris-scattered floor, his 6 limbs barely responding. The ship's artificial gravity had failed hours ago, leaving everything floating in a nightmarish ballet of destruction. Bodies of his squad mates drifted past, or what remained of them. The hegemony's finest hunters, reduced to this. And by humans. Primitive, barely space-capable humans. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so thoroughly terrifying. Status report, Hunter Prime. The voice crackled through his damaged comm implant, distant and distorted. Command was still out there, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, waiting for word of their glorious success. If only they knew. Zentha's memory core flickered, replaying the mission briefing with that particular kind of crystal clarity that trauma brings. Commander Ilix had been so confident, her silver exoskeleton gleaming under the briefing room's harsh lights. Species designation, human. Classification, primitive mammalian bipeds. Threat level, negligible. Expected resistance, none. The holographic display had shown their target system, a backwater corner of the galaxy where a young species was just beginning to crawl beyond their homeworld. 12 hunters for a simple collection mission. It should have been routine. Capture a few specimens, run some basic analysis, file the report. Another day, another primitive species catalogued for the hegemony's vast archives. They've barely achieved rudimentary faster-than-light travel, Ilix had continued, her mandibles clicking with what passed for amusement among her kind. Their neural development suggests pack-hunting behavior, but their social structures are fragmented. No unified response capability. Zenth had nodded along with the others. The Vex'hai were proud hunters, and this assignment felt almost insulting. His people had brought down creatures that could shatter planets with their screams. These humans were supposed to be nothing more than clever animals. The first sign something was wrong came when they found their targets. Europa Station orbited Jupiter's ice moon, a research facility disguised as a mining operation. Simple enough, 2 humans, isolated from their pack, working alone in the cold void. The male was some kind of merchant, negotiating trade agreements. The female, a scientist studying the station's geothermal vents. Perfect specimens. The capture went exactly as planned. Too exactly, Zenth realized now. The male, Kael something, hadn't screamed when they materialized around him. Hadn't run. He'd simply looked up from his data pad with those unsettling binocular eyes and said, "Well, this is interesting. I assume you're not here for the quarterly mineral reports." Zenth should have paid attention to that comm. Should have recognized it for what it was. Instead, they'd followed protocol. Stun fields, containment cylinders, standard neural dampeners to prevent escape attempts. The humans were secured within minutes, and the squad began their return to the ship. That's when Kael started talking. "You know," he'd said, his voice carrying clearly through the containment field speakers, "I've always wondered about the psychology of apex predators. Whether intelligence actually makes you better at hunting, or just better at telling yourself you're the hunter." Jex, their tracker, had laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Listen to it chatter. "Do all humans vocalize this much stress?" "Oh, this isn't stress," Kael had replied, and something in his tone made Zentha's antenna twitch. "This is pattern recognition. I'm just trying to figure out which one of you is going to kill the others first." The ship had fallen silent except for the hum of life support systems. "You see," Kael continued conversationally, "I used to work in corporate acquisitions. You learn to read people, or in this case, I guess, beings. Body language, social hierarchies, stress indicators. It's all about recognizing the patterns. Zenth had wanted to tell him to be quiet, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was professional curiosity. What could this primitive possibly think it understood about their carefully structured hunting pack? Take you, for instance, Kael said, and somehow Zenth knew the human was looking directly at him despite the opaque containment field. Crystalline physiology, probably silicon-based. You keep your limbs positioned to maintain maximum awareness of all squad members. Classic alpha behavior, but you're not the mission commander. That's the tall one with the silver exoskeleton, right? Which means you're the designated survivor. Zentha's carapace had prickled with something that wasn't quite fear. Not yet. And the red one, lots of aggressive posturing, but he keeps deferring to tall silver and shiny. Second in command, probably. Wants to be in charge but lacks the political connections. Kael paused. The others are interesting too. Is that one molting? Because if I were a hunter, I wouldn't want to be partnered with someone whose skin might start falling off at an inconvenient moment. That had been the first crack in their unity. Vorth, their newest member, was indeed in the early stages of a molt cycle. It was supposed to be a minor detail, irrelevant to the mission. But the human had identified it instantly and, worse, pointed out its tactical implications. The thing about pack dynamics, Kael had continued as they'd loaded him into the ship's holding bay, is that they only work when everyone believes in the hierarchy. Start questioning who belongs where, and the whole structure gets unstable pretty quickly. By the time they'd reached deep space, 3 of Zentha's squad mates were arguing about molt cycles and mission readiness. By the time they'd made their first hyperspace jump, accusations were flying about who had approved Vorth for active duty. And Kael just kept talking, his voice a constant stream of observations and insights that carved through their squad dynamics like acid through hull plating. Now, dragging himself toward that blinking beacon, Zenth understood what had happened. The human hadn't been trying to escape. He'd been hunting them from the moment they'd captured him. Not with claws or weapons or even physical strength. With their own minds. The beacon was almost within reach now. His remaining functional limb stretched toward it, phosphorescent fluid dripping steadily onto the deck plating. He had to make the report. Had to warn the hegemony. But how could he explain that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers? How could he make them understand that these creatures could destroy you without ever touching you, simply by showing you truths about yourself that you'd spent your entire life avoiding? The beacon activated with a soft chime. Command would be monitoring now, waiting for his report. Zenth closed his eyes and began to speak, his words carrying across the void toward the hegemony fleet. He had to get this right. Had to make them understand. Because if they didn't, the hunters would keep coming. And they would all crawl back the same way he was now, broken, terrified, and utterly alone. Status confirmed, Hunter Prime. Transmitting debrief protocol. The hegemony's response crackled through subspace with mechanical efficiency. They wanted data, numbers, tactical assessments. Clean reports that fit into their neat little boxes. Zenth almost laughed, a sound that came out as a crystalline wheeze. How do you quantify the moment when 12 apex predators realized they were prey? It had started so simply. Just Kael talking in that holding cell, his voice carrying through the ship's intercom system because nobody had bothered to disable prisoner communications. Why would they? What threat could vocal noises possibly pose? Elena, Kael had said to his fellow captive on the second day, I need you to trust me on something. When I start talking about their breeding cycles, I need you to look horrified. The female scientist had given him a look that suggested she thought he'd lost his mind. Kael, what exactly are you planning? Pattern disruption, he'd replied, and even through the static-filled recording that Zenth now played back through his damaged memory core, that casual confidence was chilling. Every social structure has fault lines. You just have to know where to apply pressure. Zenth had been monitoring the conversation, of course. Standard security protocol. But he dismissed it as typical mammalian pack-bonding behavior. Prey species often sought comfort in vocalizations when stressed. He'd been so very wrong. The molting one, Vorth, he's not just physically vulnerable, Kael had continued. Did you notice how the others position themselves when he's around? They're unconsciously treating him like a contamination risk. Which means their species probably has some kind of cultural taboo around molt cycles. Elena had caught on quickly. You're going to turn them against each other. I'm not going to do anything, Kael had corrected. They're going to do it themselves. I'm just going to help them see what's already there. The first real crack had come during their third hyperspace jump. Kael had started asking questions about navigation, innocent, curious questions that any primitive might ask when experiencing faster-than-light travel for the first time. Fascinating technology, he'd said to Jex during the tracker's routine security check. I'm curious though, who calculates the jump coordinates? The silver one seems to be in command, but she doesn't strike me as the technical type. Jex had preened slightly, his metallic hide shifting colors. Navigation is a specialist's role. Command gives orders, but we execute. Ah, Kael had nodded thoughtfully. So you're actually the one keeping us alive out here. Must be a lot of responsibility, making sure we don't end up inside a star or something. It had been such a simple seed, planted with surgical precision. Within hours, Jex was subtly emphasizing his critical role to the other squad members. By the end of the day, Commander Ilix was reasserting her authority with increasing aggression. The hierarchy that had seemed so stable was beginning to show stress fractures. But that was just the beginning. The red one's interesting, Kael had observed to Elena during what they thought was a private moment. The ship's internal sensors had picked up every word, of course, but Zenth had been too focused on monitoring for escape attempts to pay attention to prisoner chatter. Another mistake. He keeps checking the chronometer every few minutes, Kael had continued. Classic anxiety behavior. I'm guessing he's got some kind of biological deadline approaching. Probably reproductive. Elena had glanced toward the holding cell's observation window. How can you possibly know that? Micro-expressions translate across species better than you'd think. Plus, he's been unconsciously grooming those ridges along his neck. Either he's preparing for a mating display or he's developing a skin condition. Kael's voice had carried that same unsettling calm. Either way, it's something he's worried the others might notice. Zentha's memory core flickered as it reached the part he tried hardest to forget. The moment when Kael had looked directly into the security camera and smiled. You know I can see you watching, right? The human had said, his binocular eyes focusing on the lens with predatory precision. Your breathing changed when I mentioned the red one's anxiety. Which means I hit something true. The temperature in the monitoring station had seemed to drop several degrees. The thing about being human, Kael had continued conversationally, is that we evolved as persistence hunters. We didn't chase down prey with speed or strength. We followed it until it collapsed from exhaustion. Psychological persistence hunting works the same way, you just keep applying pressure until the target's mental defenses break down. That had been day 4. By day 7, the squad was barely holding together. Vorth had become increasingly paranoid about his molt cycle, convinced that the others were planning to abandon him. Jex had started questioning every order from Commander Ilix, citing his superior navigation expertise. The breeding anxious Corvin had begun displaying aggressively toward anyone who looked at his neck ridges too long. And through it all, Kael had kept talking. Observing. Commenting. His voice had become a constant presence throughout the ship, offering insights that were always accurate and invariably devastating. Your commander's losing control, he'd said during the 10th day, addressing his words to the ship in general. You can hear it in the way she modulates her voice now. She's overcompensating for uncertainty with volume and authority markers. Classic leadership breakdown pattern. Ilix had stormed into the holding bay that day, her silver exoskeleton gleaming with aggressive bioluminescence. Enough, she'd snarled, her mandibles clicking with barely controlled rage. You will be silent. Kael had looked at her with something that might have been pity. You know what the really interesting thing is? You're all apex predators from your respective worlds. Built to hunt, to kill, to dominate. But you've never encountered prey that hunts back. We are not prey, Ilex had hissed. No. Kael had tilted his head slightly. Then why are you so afraid of what I might say next? That night, Corvin had attacked Vorth during a routine systems check, convinced that the molting tracker was sabotaging the mission. The fight had damaged critical power conduits. While they'd tried to make repairs, Jex had accused Ilex of incompetent leadership and attempted to take command of the ship. The mutiny had lasted 6 hours and left 3 squad members dead. In the aftermath, as they'd struggled to maintain life support with a damaged ship and a fractured command structure, Kael had made his final observation. You want to know the real difference between humans and every other species you've catalogued? He'd said, his voice carrying through the ship's failing intercom system. We don't just kill our prey. We make it complicit in its own destruction. The remaining squad members had turned on each other within the hour. By the time the ship had crashed on this nameless moon, only Zenth remained alive, and barely at that. Now, lying broken in the wreckage, he finally reached the emergency beacon. His remaining functional appendage activated the transmission array, sending his report across the void toward the hegemony fleet. Command, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the failing life support systems. Mission failure. Total squad loss. Recommend immediate species reclassification. Acknowledged, Hunter Prime. Please specify new classification parameters. Zenth closed his eyes, phosphorescent fluid pooling beneath his shattered carapace. How could he make them understand? How could he explain that humanity's true weapon wasn't technology or numbers, but their ability to see through the lies that every civilization told itself? Classification, Apex Social Predator, he transmitted. Threat level, Extinction Class. Recommendation, avoid all contact. Do not attempt capture. Do not attempt communication. He paused, gathering what little strength remained. They don't just hunt prey, Command. They hunt hunters. And they make us grateful for the privilege. The beacon continued its steady pulse, carrying his warning across the galaxy. Somewhere out there, the hegemony fleet would receive his report and make their decision. Would they listen? Would they understand? Or would they send more hunters, convinced that their superior technology and numbers could succeed where Zentha's squad had failed? As darkness closed around his vision, Zenth found himself hoping they would listen. Not for humanity's sake, but for their own. Because if they didn't, the next report would be coming from a human ship, transmitted to whatever remained of the hegemony's scattered fleets. And somehow, that possibility terrified him more than death itself.